me tell you about the day I achieved financial perfection. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the market had just closed, and I was in that quiet, empty hour between the end of the professional day and the obligation of the evening. A push notification glowed on my phone. Congratulations, your FICO score 8 has been updated. I tapped it. There it was, in crisp digital typeface. 825. The zenith. The promised land. The numerical embodiment of everything I had been told to strive for since I opened my first student credit card. Emails from 3 different monitoring services arrived in chorus, offering celebratory platitudes. According to the algorithms and the institutions they served, I was now a member of an elite cohort, the exceptional. I had mastered the system. I had played the game, and by all visible metrics, I had won. I should have felt a surge of triumph, a profound security, a deep-seated validation of my adulthood. Instead, I felt nothing. Or rather, a chilling, hollow nothingness that slowly constricted into a knot of dread in my chest. That evening, I sat in my apartment, a well-appointed space filled with the curated evidence of my success. The leather sofa purchased on a 36-month no-interest plan, the premium sound system that had sweetened my rewards card points, the sleek, German-engineered car sitting in the reserved parking spot downstairs, its moderate monthly payment a testament to my excellent rate. I was surrounded by the artifacts of a life built on leverage, and I realized with a clarity that was both sudden and brutal that I owned almost nothing of substance. I was a tenant in my own existence. The foundation of my financial identity was not built on granite, but on a complex, carefully maintained web of permissions and obligations. This was the great delusion, the seductive lie at the heart of our modern financial mythology. We are conditioned from our first pre-approved credit card offer in college to believe that a good credit score is synonymous with financial intelligence, moral responsibility, and ultimate security. We chase it like a holy grail, pouring our energy into manipulating the components of a proprietary algorithm, mistaking the fever chart of our creditworthiness for the true map of our wealth. My journey to 825 was a masterclass in this delusion. I became a tactical operator within a narrow, sanctioned framework. I was the credit card churner, meticulously applying for new cards to harvest sign-up bonuses, then dutifully meeting the minimum spend requirements not through necessity, but through manufactured consumption. I tracked statement cycles and payment due dates like a general orchestrating a campaign, ensuring not a single penny of interest was paid, while simultaneously keeping my credit utilization perfectly poised below the magic 30% threshold. I took out an auto loan for a car I could have bought with cash, simply because the dealer offered a promotional rate that was too good to pass up, ignoring the fundamental truth that I was now willingly indenturing myself to a rapidly depreciating asset for 5 years. I had conflated financial sophistication with systemic compliance. Every decision was filtered through a single reductive question. What will this do to my score? Not, will this make me wealthier? Not, does this align with my long-term vision for freedom? But, will this 3-digit number go up? I had become a perfect data point, a predictable and profitable unit within the financial ecosystem. I was what they call in the industry a transactor, a customer who reliably uses credit, leverages the system's offerings, and never misses a payment, thereby generating steady interchange fees and presenting pristine, low-risk profitability. This is the core shock, the first fissure in the delusion. Your credit score is not a measure of your wealth, your intelligence, or even your financial stability in a holistic sense. It is, in the cold calculus of the institutions that use it, a measure of your profitability as a revenue stream. It assesses how reliably you can be expected to borrow money and pay it back with interest, or at the very least, how effectively you can generate fee-based income for lenders through your active participation. You are not merely a consumer. You are the product. Your financial behavior is packaged, analyzed, and sold. Your future earnings are collateral for your present-day concessions. The entire architecture of consumer credit is ingeniously designed to foster this confusion. It incentivizes consumption over creation, debt over ownership. It has spawned the monthly payment mentality, perhaps its most psychologically potent innovation. We no longer ask, what does this cost? We ask, what will this cost me per month? This subtle reframing is an anesthetic for the soul. It makes a $40,000 car feel accessible because it's only $699. It divorces us from the true aggregated cost of our choices and ties our time, our finite, irreplaceable life energy, to an endless cycle of servicing the lifestyle we have been persuaded to lease. I sat in the gathering dark of my apartment, the glow of my 825 score still faint on my phone screen. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was accusatory. I had followed every rule. I had achieved the pinnacle. And yet I felt a profound sense of imprisonment. The score was not a key to my freedom. It was a beautifully gilded indicator of how thoroughly I had bought into a system designed to keep me in a state of productive, perpetual servitude. I was earning a good income, yet I felt financially precarious. I had access to credit, yet I had no accessible capital. I had mastered a game whose ultimate prize was merely the right to keep playing it under slightly more favorable terms. The panic that began to rise was not about debt or bills. Those were managed with robotic efficiency. It was the terror of glimpsing the horizon of a future where decades more of this perfect behavior led not to liberation, but to a more elegant, more comfortable cage. The moment of understanding was not an intellectual one. It was a visceral, somatic shock. The foundation I had built my adult life upon was made of sand, and the tide was coming in. And as that dread settled into a cold, hard certainty, I had no idea that my liberation would begin with a man society, and that very credit system had labeled a failure. The catalyst for my awakening would not be a billionaire on a stage or a textbook on economics. It would be a conversation with a man whose credit score was a ruinous 512. He was about to show me that everything I believed was not just incomplete, but backward. And that conversation would begin with a single, devastating question that shattered my delusion forever. The unraveling of my carefully constructed world began not in a boardroom or a banker's office, but in a weathered industrial park on the outskirts of the city. I was there to conduct due diligence for a potential client, a small-scale manufacturing firm specializing in custom aerospace components. The owner, a man named Robert, met me at the door of a nondescript warehouse. He wore faded jeans, work boots, and a faint, permanent smudge of machine grease on his forearm, a stark contrast to the sterile financial environments I inhabited. His handshake was firm. His eyes held a calm, assessing clarity, and he spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who understood materials, tolerances, and tangible outcomes. His business, however, was a puzzle. On paper, it was a concerning prospect. The corporate structure was young. Its financials showed volatile cash flow, and a preliminary background check had flagged something alarming. Robert's personal credit score was 512. In the lexicon I understood, this was the score of a pariah. It suggested delinquency, irresponsibility, systemic failure. It was a bright red warning sign that screamed risk. I had entered that warehouse prepared to see the physical manifestation of that number. Chaos, disrepair, desperation. Instead, I found quiet, humming efficiency. The floor was clean, organized. CNC machines carved intricate geometries from blocks of titanium with mesmerizing precision. Skilled technicians moved with focused purpose. The air smelled of metal and coolant, not decay. Robert spoke about his business not in terms of credit lines or scores, but in terms of client relationships, metallurgical innovations, and on-time delivery for contracts with major defense contractors. He showed me purchase orders that dwarfed my annual salary. He pointed to machinery he owned outright. There was an undeniable, grounded prosperity here, one that existed in complete contradiction to the three-digit verdict of the scoring algorithms. My professional facade finally cracked under the cognitive dissonance. "Forgive my bluntness, Robert," I began, choosing my words carefully. "But our standard review showed your personal credit profile. Given the obvious success and sophistication of this operation, I have to ask, what happened?" He didn't flinch. He didn't look away in shame. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face, as if he had been waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. He wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against a workbench. "What happened?" he echoed, his voice low and even. "I stopped feeding the wrong beast. That score isn't a failure. It's a strategic withdrawal," he explained. A decade prior, he had been like me. A good score, a suffocating portfolio of consumer debt, a car loan, credit cards financing lifestyle and equipment for a fledgling side business, even a personal loan to cover a tax bill. He was juggling payments, worshiping at the altar of his FICO, and watching his real dream, this machine shop, starve for capital. The crisis point came when a critical lathe broke down. The repair was $15,000. His personal credit was tapped out. The bank, seeing his high personal debt-to-income ratio despite his good score, denied him a business loan. He was trapped by his own perceived creditworthiness. "That's when I saw the trap," he said. "My personal credit was a leash. It measured my past obedience to a system of consumption, not my future capacity for production. So, I made a ruthless calculation." He stopped paying the non-essential debts, the credit cards, the personal loan. He focused every single dollar on two things: keeping his core business utilities alive and making the strategic payments that had direct consequences, his commercial warehouse lease and the loan on his one essential piece of equipment, which was held under a separate commercial agreement. He let his personal score implode. It was a controlled demolition. The collectors called. The letters came. "My score sank into the abyss," he said, his gaze steady. And a funny thing happened. Freed from those monthly personal obligations, my business cash flow stabilized. Then it grew. I plowed every dollar back into the business, into tools we owned, into inventory, into building a reputation for quality. I built business credit under the company's employer identification number, completely separate from my personal wreckage. Now, my company gets six-figure lines of credit from suppliers based on its performance, not my personal score. That 512? He gestured vaguely toward the world outside his warehouse. That's just the scar from cutting off the leash. It's the price of admission to this. He opened his arms to encompass the thriving workshop around him. In that moment, the foundational architecture of my understanding collapsed. Robert was not a failure. He was a fugitive. He had escaped the system I was diligently perfecting. The shock was not his low score, but the profound inversion of logic his situation revealed. The system had labeled him high risk precisely because he had chosen to de-optimize for it, to redirect his financial life energy from being a reliable consumer to becoming an independent creator. His personal credit was poor because he had consciously chosen to stop being a profitable revenue stream for consumer lenders, so he could become a capital accumulator for himself. This was my core realization, the seismic shift that redefined everything. Credit is not capital. Credit is rented money, a temporary resource you must repay with future labor, forever tying your time to a past decision. It is a liability on your personal balance sheet until extinguished. Capital, however, is deployed money, wealth that is invested in assets that generate income, appreciate, or produce value. Capital works for you. You work to repay credit. I had spent a decade amassing the former while starving the latter. I had a stellar ability to borrow, but no meaningful engine of my own to borrow for. Robert had the opposite, a ravaged ability to borrow for a television or a car, but a powerful humming engine, his business, that generated capital and could access its own separate lines of credit. He had sacrificed the symbol for the substance. My aha moment was this visceral understanding. I was not a wealthy man with a great score. I was a highly paid, deeply obedient employee of the banking system, using my labor to maintain the pristine conditions of my own financial servitude. Robert, the 512, was an owner. He was free. This forced a complete and uncomfortable deconstruction of the very pillars I had worshipped. I began to see the FICO score not as a report card, but as a proprietary algorithm designed to assess profitability, not prosperity. Payment history, 35%. This was not a test of responsibility. It was a test of obedience. A consistent record signaled a predictable subject who prioritized the system's rules above all else. Amounts owed, 30%. This did not measure wealth, it measured dependence. High utilization signaled an ongoing reliance on the system, a healthy revenue stream for lenders. Zero utilization, paradoxically, made you less predictable, less profitable. Length of credit history, 15%. This was not about wisdom. It was about predictability over time. A long history provided more data points to model your behavior to ensure you were a stable long-term bet. New credit, 10%, and credit mix, 10%. These were indicators of engagement and sophistication. Frequent applications could signal distress or a strategic churner. A diverse mix showed you could handle multiple types of debt obligations, a more comprehensively engaged customer. The score was a beautifully engineered tool for them. It efficiently identified the Roberts of the world not as failures, but as exiters, and marked them accordingly. It identified people like me as ideal candidates for perpetual profitable engagement. Standing in that warehouse, the noise of the machines became a metaphor. I had been listening to the soothing, synthetic hum of my own credit dashboard. Robert listened to the real, powerful, productive noise of the engine he built. The path forward was no longer about improving my score. It was about answering a terrifying and liberating question. How do I make this system a temporary, tactical tool for my own goals, rather than allowing it to be the permanent architect of my life? The game had changed. I was no longer playing for a high score. I was learning how to win. Armed with the disorienting clarity from my encounter with Robert, I faced a stark landscape. The old map, the one that led to the peak of an 825 score, was useless. It had guided me to a vista of emptiness. I needed a new one, not for climbing a ladder within the system, but for building a structure independent of it. This was not about repair. It was about redesign. I had to transition from being a tenant, carefully maintaining a leased existence, to becoming the architect of my own financial sovereignty. This framework is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is a methodical reallocation of focus from consumption to creation, executed in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1, the strategic reset, an audit of allegiance. The first step was not action, but a ruthless and unemotional audit. I had to view every financial artifact in my life not through the lens of, does this help my score? But through the new, clarifying question, does this serve my future as an asset builder, or does it bind me to my past as a consumer? This was the credit purge, a psychological severance more than a financial one. I did not impulsively close long-held credit card accounts, as that would have needlessly damaged the very history metric I now understood. Instead, I performed a triage. I physically removed from my wallet every card that existed solely for points, miles, or the facilitation of lifestyle spending. These were not tools. They were temptations, engineered mechanisms to separate me from my capital under the guise of rewarding me. I left active only a single no-fee card with a high limit to be used strictly for automated necessary monthly expenses set to auto-pay in full from a cash account. This minimized my engagement with the system while preserving its utility as a strategic placeholder. Next, I confronted the liabilities. Here, I moved beyond the conventional debt snowball or avalanche methods, which focus solely on interest rates. I adopted a cash flow liberation strategy. I listed every debt with its minimum monthly payment. My primary goal was not just to reduce total interest paid, but to systematically eliminate the obligations that represented pure, non-productive consumption. Each debt paid off was not just a line item zeroed out. It was a portion of my future monthly income being reclaimed from the past. This freed up cash flow was not earmarked for more consumption. It was the seed capital for Phase 2. Phase 2, building for leverage, not for lifestyle. The singular rule. With a cleansed mindset and a growing pool of reclaimed capital, I entered the phase of intentional construction. This phase is governed by one non-negotiable rule. Debt, if used, is only permissible for acquiring assets that have the potential to appreciate in value or generate income. This rule transforms credit from a facilitator of lifestyle inflation into a tactical lever for capital acquisition. The most powerful and accessible application of this rule is in real estate, specifically through a strategy known as house hacking. Here, the personal credit system is used once, decisively, to acquire an asset that then works to dismantle its own cost. I used my good credit score not to secure a mortgage for a personal sanctuary, but to purchase a modest multi-unit property, a small duplex. I moved into one unit and rented the other. The rental income covered a significant majority of the mortgage, taxes, and insurance. My personal housing cost, my single largest monthly expense, was reduced by over 70% overnight. The psychological and financial impact was profound. I was no longer merely paying a landlord or a bank for shelter. I was now a homeowner, but more importantly, I was a fund manager. My tenant's rent was not my income. It was capital being deployed to acquire an equity stake in a tangible asset. Every mortgage payment, largely subsidized, was a transfer of ownership from the bank to me. The good credit I had cultivated was no longer an end in itself. It was a key I used one time to unlock a door that led out of the cycle of pure consumption. Contrast this with the earlier car loan, a depreciating liability that drained capital and required perfect credit to maintain. The duplex was an appreciating, income-producing asset that required good credit to initially acquire, but then began the process of making my reliance on that score increasingly irrelevant. Phase 3. The business credit separation. Building the second engine. While personal credit could be weaponized for a single, powerful asset purchase, true scale and separation require a second parallel financial identity. This is the ultimate strategic evolution, building a business credit profile completely distinct from your personal self. This process begins with formalizing a business entity, an LLC or S corporation, and obtaining an employer identification number, EIN, from the IRS. This number becomes the social security number for your business. With an EIN, a dedicated business bank account, and a track record of revenue, even from a side venture or consulting, you can begin to establish credit for the entity. Vendors, suppliers, and certain lenders will extend trade credit or lines of credit based on the business's financial health and payment history, not your personal FICO score. This achieves the critical separation Robert embodied. Your personal life and its associated credit score become a protected silo, a defensive moat. Your business becomes an offensive engine, capable of accessing capital based on its own performance. A business line of credit can fund inventory, equipment, or expansion without putting your personal assets or credit score at direct risk. This is where you transition from using personal credit as a limited tool to building institutional credibility for your ventures. The mindset here is everything. The architect does not obsess over the quality of the rental tools. He uses them precisely as needed to pour the foundation and erect the framing of his own durable structure. Once that structure is self-supporting, the tools are returned. My personal credit score was a rental tool. The duplex was the foundation. A future business credit line would be the crane for building higher. The goal was no longer to polish the tool, but to complete the building so the tool was no longer necessary. I was no longer a player in their game, trying to beat the high score. I was a designer, and the game was of my own making. The rules were different. Cash flow over credit limits, capital over credit, and ownership over obedience. The score was now a single metric in a vast spreadsheet, not the headline. The initial shock of understanding was an intellectual earthquake, but the real, enduring tremor, the one that reshapes the landscape of your life, is psychological. To see the game for what it is to be forever exiled from the comfortable delusion of the players. This phase is not about spreadsheets or strategies. It is about the profound and often isolating internal recalibration required to live by a new truth. The framework provides the map, but walking the path demands paying a price in social friction, confronting deep-seated fears, and enduring the quiet labor of metamorphosis. The social friction, the weight of counter-cultural choice. The first tangible cost is social. When you cease to participate in the dominant consumer narrative, you become a walking, talking anomaly. Your choices, made from a place of strategic clarity, are interpreted through the lens of mainstream financial dogma as eccentric, regressive, or even foolish. You will feel this weight in subtle and overt ways. You decline an invitation to lease a new luxury vehicle with your peers, citing a focus on cash flow, and are met with puzzled looks or gentle teasing about being cheap. You explain to family that you are purchasing a modest multifamily property to house hack, not a suburban single-family home, and you witness a flicker of concern. Are you struggling? Making odd choices? At social gatherings, conversations about the latest finance gadgets or vacation packages roll past you like a foreign language. Your decision to drive a used, paid-off car while your rental property generates income is not seen as a sophisticated leverage play. It is often misinterpreted as a lack of success. This friction generates a unique form of loneliness. It is the loneliness of the apostate. You have left the Church of Consumer Credit, but the entire culture is still built upon its liturgy. Your new beliefs are silent and internal, manifesting only as conspicuous non-participation. You must develop a fortified sense of conviction, learning to derive validation from the quiet growth of your net worth statement rather than the audible admiration for your new possessions. You learn to offer vague, non-confrontational responses. It's just not a priority right now. Or I'm allocating funds differently this year to preserve relationships without betraying your new principles. The pressure to revert, to simply take the 0% APR offer and rejoin the tribe, is a constant low-grade temptation. The fear, confronting the abyss of wasted time and awakened potential. Beyond social friction lies a more intimate, more paralyzing fear. This is the fear you requested, not of monsters, but of mirrors. It manifests in two powerful forms. First, the retrospective terror. What if I am right and I have wasted years? This is a devastating calculation. It is the realization that the decade spent optimizing for a score could have been a decade spent building capital. The compounded growth of those misallocated funds becomes a ghostly alternative life, a road not taken that haunts your present. This fear is not irrational. It is a painful arithmetic of opportunity cost. It can induce a panicked urgency, a dangerous impulse to make reckless, oversized bets to catch up, which is merely the old gambler's mentality in new clothes. Managing this fear requires a disciplined acceptance. The past is sunk cost. The insight, however painful, is a gift that arrived precisely when you were ready to use it. The energy must be directed forward, not squandered on mourning a phantom portfolio. Second, the systemic fear, the sheer gravitational pull of the old world. You now understand that every advertisement, every pre-approved offer, every seductive narrative of deserving luxury is a finely tuned magnet designed to pull you back into your role as a revenue stream. The system is not malicious in a personal sense. It is indifferent and omnipresent. The fear is that your willpower is insufficient, that the programming is too deep. You will feel it when you browse online and algorithms serve you the perfect financeable object of desire. You will feel it when a life event triggers an emotional urge to spend and the old pathways in your brain light up, offering credit as the solution. This is the fear of recidivism, of slowly, comfortably being lulled back into the delusion. Combating it requires constant, conscious reinforcement of your new identity, the architect, not the tenant. The liberation timeline from confusion to confidence. The journey is not linear, but it follows a recognizable emotional arc. Acknowledging this timeline provides solace during its more difficult stages. Confusion and cognitive dissonance. The initial phase where old beliefs clash with new evidence. Everything feels unstable. This was my state in Robert's warehouse. Anger and frustration. The realization of the deception, often directed at the system, at institutions, and most painfully at oneself for not seeing it sooner. This anger can be a potent, if volatile, fuel for change. Clarity and strategic vision. The anger subsides, replaced by the clean, sharp light of understanding. The new framework emerges. Plans are drawn. This phase is intellectually exhilarating. Execution and the grind. The least glamorous, most critical phase. This is the daily, weekly, monthly work of the audit, the debt payoff, the property search, the business formation. It is fraught with administrative friction and setbacks. The grand vision meets mundane reality. Confidence and integration. The moment when theory becomes lived experience. It may be the first month your assets cash flow pays a bill previously covered by your labor. It is the profound, quiet click when you realize a marketing plea no longer resonates because it is speaking to a person you no longer are. Your financial decisions are no longer struggles of willpower. They are expressions of a solidified identity. The fear is not gone, but it is managed. The friction is not absent, but it is irrelevant. This transformation's most profound moment is not a financial milestone, but a psychological one. When you realize you are no longer afraid of a low credit score, but you have become respectfully wary of an over-reliance on a high one. You have transferred your faith from the system's metric to your own capacity. The cage door was never locked. It was simply the only reality you could perceive. The true cost of knowing is the burden of that freedom, the irrevocable responsibility to build your own world, brick by brick, once you have seen that the walls around you were of your own making. The journey we have traced does not end with a final number. It culminates in a new lens through which to view your entire financial existence. Let us recapitulate the path, not as a series of steps, but as a fundamental migration of identity. We began in the delusion, where I mistook a high credit score for financial success, only to find myself a prosperous servant within a gilded cage. The system had trained me to be a perfect, predictable revenue stream. The catalyst for my escape was the unlearning, a brutal and liberating inversion of logic. A man with a ruined personal score demonstrated that true wealth is measured in capital and cash flow, not in creditworthiness. He revealed the core distinction. Credit is rented money you serve. Capital is owned money that serves you. I stopped seeing myself as a player trying to beat a game and began seeing the game itself as a construct to be strategically navigated. This led to the framework, the architectural plan. We moved from being tenants to becoming architects. We performed a strategic reset, auditing our allegiances. We adopted the singular rule of using debt only for acquiring appreciating or income-producing assets, turning credit into a tactical lever. We laid the groundwork for a business credit separation, building a second, independent financial engine. The goal shifted from optimizing a score to optimizing for ownership and optionality. Inevitably, this journey demanded the psychological transformation. We confronted the social friction of living counterculturally and faced the profound fears of wasted time and systemic pull. We moved through the liberation timeline, from confusion and anger through clarity and the grind toward a hard-won confidence. The cost of knowing was the burden of freedom, and its reward was the erosion of the cage. This brings us to the final, unifying understanding. The entire financial system, with its scores and its offers and its seductive narratives, is ultimately a vast, complex mechanism designed to solicit one thing from you: your future labor. It seeks to monetize your time, your potential, your life energy in advance. Your credit score is simply the premium it places on that future labor based on your historical predictability. Therefore, true financial power cannot be found in a 3-digit score. It is found in one word: options. Financial power is the option to walk away from a toxic job because your assets cover your essentials. It is the option to say yes to a business opportunity because you have access to capital without personal peril. It is the option to take a risk, to weather a storm, to invest in a relationship or a passion, because your security is not tied to a single source of wages or a pristine credit report. It is the quiet, profound authority that comes from knowing your survival is not contingent on your next paycheck or your next credit card payment. Your credit score should occupy the same mental space as the plumbing in your house. You want it to be functional, reliable, and quietly competent when you need it. You maintain it to prevent catastrophic leaks. But you do not for a moment believe your home's value, your family's security, or your personal happiness is derived from the quality of your pipes. They are a utility, a vital one, but a utility nonetheless. They are not the foundation, the walls, or the roof. They are a subsystem within a structure you own. My story did not end with that 825 score in a dark apartment. It began there. The emptiness I felt was the birth pang of a new consciousness. This narrative is but one thread in a vast tapestry of reclamation. The path from being used by a system to using it strategically is paved with difficult choices, shocking truths, and breakthroughs that are as much about identity as they are about income. If this resonates with you, if you felt that stir of recognition as I described the delusion, that chill of understanding at the inverted logic, or that quiet yearning for the architect's clarity, then you are ready for more. You are ready to move beyond theory and witness the tangible, gritty human process of transformation. You are ready to see not just the what, but the how of the comeback. This is where our journey together in this narrative finds its next chapter. On our YouTube channel, Credit Comeback Stories, we delve beyond the philosophy. We dissect real case studies. We analyze the blueprints of individuals who have walked this path. You will see the breakdown of how someone repaired shattered credit, not to return to consumption, but to qualify for a mortgage on their first rental property. You will follow the process of a family escaping predatory debt to launch a profitable home-based business. You will witness the strategic moves, the setbacks, and the triumphs that compose a true financial turnaround. Each story is a unique blueprint, but all share the common foundation of shifting from a consumer mindset to a creator mindset. We provide the analysis, the tools, and the community to help you draft your own. Therefore, I extend to you a direct and purposeful invitation. If you are ready to stop being a character in someone else's profit story and start becoming the unequivocal author of your own, subscribe to Credit Comeback Stories today. Click that notification bell so you never miss a breakdown of a real-world financial transformation. Do not let this moment of clarity be another piece of consumed content. Let it be the catalyst for your own action. Your journey from tenant to architect, from revenue stream to owner, begins with a single, deliberate choice. Your comeback story starts now.